Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And our whole goal today is to explore some of the different strategies that you can take when prompting any of your AI tools. I will be demonstrating today in a GCC cloud environment, specifically using Copilot, but these principles will actually apply regardless of which tools you prefer to use and personal or professional, however you choose to apply some of these different options. So that all being said, I do just want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name's Larissa, and I work with our Evolve 365 team with Planet Technologies. So I actually have had the phenomenal opportunity of working with a number of different organizations as they have explored Copilot and seen where it fits in, tested its capabilities and limitations, and hopefully I can help you find some different ways that it might be able to save you some time and support you as you go along your workflows and your AI journey. So that all being said, our agenda today is really going to be focused around prompting. So we are going to just talk about a couple of fundamentals and specifically what to expect with Copilot. And then we're going to talk about some prompting components. These are what I would recommend keeping in mind as you're trying to figure out what to include in your conversations. It's definitely not required. You can talk to Copilot or any of your AI tools however you wish to. They're natural language based. And so there's no wrong approach, but these are just some helpful tips to start giving you an insight into the ingredients for success. And so as we do that, we'll look at some different approaches and styles. And if we have some time today, we'll do some exercises together. And I'll just end with some tips and tricks to try. And feel free to try these as we're testing out today. If you can follow along, I will be sharing some prompts in the chat as well today. So we want this to be as beneficial as possible. Ask any questions that come up throughout. I will be paying close attention to the chat. And if you want to describe a little bit more, feel free to use the raise your hand feature and we can pause. So I want to start off first by addressing the GCC cloud or the government community cloud. And I know a lot of times we don't necessarily talk about which cloud we're in. And so if that term is confusing to you, a lot of the time this is talking about different US government agencies, federal, state, and local government, or it can also encompass contractors for government work. And this cloud environment specifically is designed to meet higher security expectations and compliancy with things like FedRAMP, CGIS, and so forth. So you don't have to remember all of the details of exactly what goes into a GCC cloud, but the reason I bring this up is to just let you have some insight as to where you might be, and it impacts you because certain features take a little bit longer to get to this cloud environment. There is more boxes to check off, more steps to go through. And so each of these features usually follows the announcements that they become available by about, I don't want to give an exact timeline, but usually a couple of months. So just keep that in mind when you hear different capabilities. And if you do have all of the features, that's fantastic. This will all still apply. I'm just going to be showcasing in that environment today. So as we get started, hopefully many of you are already partially onto that journey with generative AI, but I want to really emphasize that while there are a ton of different tools out there, we really want to make sure that we are using the approved resources for our organization. And the reason is when they're approved for our organization, they've gone through risk and security assessments, and they've made sure that it's set up in a way that keeps your information secure. So if you are using public resources, sometimes for just general brainstorming, that's not a problem, but anytime we're using our organization's information and data, we want to make sure that stays within the boundaries of the security we have in place with your Microsoft 365 tenant. So just something to keep in mind. There's a lot of powerful tools out there, and we just want to keep you and your information safe. So my first question as we start out today is I'd love to know a little bit more about where you all feel you're at with prompting. When I say prompting, are you not really sure what I'm talking about? That's perfectly fine. Feel free to drop a 1 in the chat. And if you're using suggested prompts or you're starting to practice but not getting the results you want, let me know that too. And for those of you who are more on that, I craft prompts all the time. I know how to kind of put this together. We would love to see your feedback and your scenarios as we go through today. So I'm going to be looking here at the chat, but I'll also put this question in there so that we can continue kind of chatting through this. But if you can give me that idea, it does just help me know a little bit more about where we stand today. So I kind of know where to start and where to keep going. Okay, so a number of us are relatively far into our journey. A couple of us here in the middle, but most of us are kind of using suggested prompts and our own, trying to get started. All right, fantastic. That's incredibly helpful. So as we're going, I do just want to kind of clarify what we mean by prompts, just in case there are a couple of us that are more towards that 1 or 2 space. And the prompt is really just the message or question that you're giving to your AI tool to direct the conversation and get unique results. So even if you see different tools that have like a quick button where it says, hey, just do this, that's still based off of a prompt. It's just written for you already. And so what we're going to talk about today is how to take kind of that foundation and build on it to get tailored results so that you have more unique insight in each of your conversations with Copilot. Now, it is a predictive functionality, and so we do want to keep a couple of things in mind as we do that. It's not going to be perfect every single time. And ideally, I'm hoping to save you time, not give you a perfect result in that conversation. You're still going to be the expert, and you still want to review and tailor anything that you do get. Now, the reason that prompting is its own topic in and of itself, instead of just the features and navigation of these different tools, is because all of these generative AI tools only really see what you type and what information you provide in that conversation. Now, sometimes we can set up different scenarios where it has access to more information about us, but in general, if you're really vague with your expectations in your conversation, you're going to get vague and maybe even incorrect information back. When we leave room for Copilot to assume, it's about as accurate as having your colleagues assume what you need and what you're looking for. So the better our prompts are, the better our results are, and ultimately, I want this to be efficient for you so that it saves you time. So essentially, the core principles that we're looking at are finding ways to be really clear and specific. We're looking at the different strategies for what context to provide, how to identify any constraints with our scenario, and also just getting comfortable with this idea that it's a conversation. We're going to go back and forth, and that iterative refinement that happens as I provide more information in the conversation elevates the results further on as well. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention there are limitations to any great tool. And one of those is what we call AI hallucinations. So if you've ever been chatting with one of these tools and it's given you something that's just incorrect, maybe it's outdated, and maybe it's completely made up, this is what a hallucination is. And that's where I mean, it's a great tool, but it's not perfect. And it's really important that you stay in the loop with anything that you start to do with Copilot, and you're verifying those results every single time. At the end of the day, if you aren't sure where it's pulling information, just keep that conversation going and ask. If it doesn't provide it up front, which it does a pretty good job of most of the time, but every once in a while, I do say, hey, where did you get this information? Or why did you make this comment? and it gives you a great insight as well. So just to get us started, I want to try a couple prompts before we get into some of the different kind of choices that we would have with the strategies that you can take. So I'm going to put a prompt here in the chat, and then I'm also going to open up just a demonstration environment here for you. So I want Copilot. I am using the basic experience of Copilot, so I don't have additional licensing here. This is just that basic experience. So it doesn't have access to any of my internal data, but it does have like my job title and the basic information like that. So I want Copilot to translate my job title into what my friends think I do, what my family thinks I do, what my boss thinks I do, and what I wish I did. The whole point of this idea, and I encourage you to do this as well, I want to showcase how beneficial it can be to get different perspectives as you're working with Copilot. It's a really collaborative partner and can provide great insights from many different perspectives, sometimes just tweaking things a little bit. So the job title that I have is Learning Strategist Team Lead. And so it's saying, okay, here's what my friends think I do. They think I create inspirational TED Talk style workshops while drinking artisanal coffee and brainstorming learning journeys. In contrast, my family thinks I fix every computer and explain how to use Excel and teach people how to do their jobs. And that's not accurate. I mean, I can show you some things about Excel. In contrast, it gives me an example of what it sees me doing based off of that job title. So if you did this, would love to see any of those pieces of results just for comparison and how it can help you view those. So that's kind of what we're going to be trying today. I'll be trying some different prompts. I'll be doing some different exploration with it. And while you are all trying that and waiting for your results, let's talk a little bit about the mindset to have when crafting a prompt. I find this really helpful to talk about because if you can understand the approach that we're taking and why these different components are coming together, it will help you think through what to add in. And that's all just called context engineering. It's a fancy term for saying we want to think of Copilot as if it is a brand new team member. So if you have a new team member that's joining your team and it's their first day and they haven't had a chance to get oriented to all of the different things they can do, if we just say, hey, go get me a summary so I can get this reporting for our weekly leadership call, that might not mean a whole lot to them. And so what we want to do is not just tell it what we want, but how do we want it? What are the expectations? Is there background? Is there history that would help make this even better? And so as you do that, you're going to think through those really clear instructions and make sure that you might not assume the same things I would expect. So let me give you some added context. So as you're doing that, some of the specific things that I would encourage including, one of those is going to be a persona. And so what I mean by this is when you're prompting your tool, you can have Copilot approach it from any perspective you want. If you don't give it a perspective, it will just take its best guess with everything that it has. But when you give it a persona, it focuses in on certain knowledge sets and then says, hey, with this lens and this mentality, do this task. The next piece is the task itself. So this is where we want to really clearly state the expectation. Sometimes we are more ambiguous than we mean to be, and we want to make sure that we have stated the expectation. Very closely tied to that is going to be the format that you're looking for. Sometimes we think it's inherent in the task itself, like if I wanted Copilot to help me write a team email, technically email is a format, and most likely I'll get a subject and some content for the body of the email. But how much better would it be if I said, give me an email with one introductory paragraph, a table explaining these dates, and a friendly sign off? That's going to be a much different result if I can kind of share what that email actually looks like. And that translates to things like if you're trying to build documents in different sections and maybe you're building a PowerPoint, those different formats are going to guide Copilot into what information it should start to lay out for you. Similar to that idea of adding in a persona to approach the task with, when we identify an audience, this also allows some insight into the complexity and the tone of how we're approaching the messaging that we're working on. Depending on what you're putting together, sometimes it's communication, sometimes it's a presentation, and sometimes you're just brainstorming. All of that is going to, again, focus in those knowledge sources because it has a lot of information. We want to make sure it's using the best information for this task. And last but not least, while tone can be sometimes inferred from the audience itself, explicitly stating what tones we want to take into account will give it a much more human and personalized feeling in those results. So if you're dealing with maybe a sensitive situation in maybe your inner team, you might need to craft a message that is direct and that is succinct, but you still want that layer of humanity in there. And so you might want to be sympathetic or empathetic and understanding. Maybe you want to approach with curiosity. As you start to layer multiple different ideas like this together, you'll get something that sounds a lot more like you and gives you ideas of how you might want to approach some of those different types of conversations. So just kind of a starting space. These are elements that will help elevate your prompt. Another way to think of this is just kind of working through this mentality of, you can remember the acronym GCSE. So the G is for goal. What's your intended objective? C is for context. What details are related to our goal? So this could include things like your audience or background. Your source. So are you looking at a specific document? Because if so, let's add that document to the conversation. Again, when we're with Copilot in our organization, we have data protection. So we can use some of those proprietary documents to leverage AI to help see really specifically into what we're doing. And then the last one for E is going to be expectation, which is, okay, I've given you all this other information. What am I expecting you to do with it? So as you use these different pieces, your prompt could look something like this. It's kind of fun if you think of it as a Mad Libs game, if you will. If you change any of these specific details, it's going to give you a completely different type of response. So I'm going to actually put that here in the chat as well, in case you want to save that as a starting point to think through. So we'll add some of these to our prompts today, but I now kind of want to transition into some of the approaches now that we've identified the specific types of details to include. I do just want to pause for a second and say, if anyone, again, has questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm keeping a close eye on it. But otherwise, I'll just keep going if there aren't any yet. All right, so as we talk about these approaches, we have the ingredients. How do we want to prepare them? So with your different prompting approaches, as you can see, there's a ton of different ones. This is not all inclusive of the different styles you can do. And there's really no wrong way. I want to show you some of these to spark inspiration and to help you start to see some different types of things you could try to do. So for example, a 0-shot prompt is where we say, hey, summarize this. There's no examples. There's really not a lot of information around it. But if I wanted to have Copilot help me rewrite something in my style of writing, I could do a 1-shot or a few-shot prompt where I give it the task and then I say, this is what good looks like. And so as you pair those together, you get even better results. But in contrast, sometimes we're doing things like analysis and we want to make sure we're not overlooking any major blind spots. And so as you work with Copilot, maybe you did the analysis here and then you do a self-critique. You get the responses back and you say, hey, what could be missing? What questions are here? What might be confusing about this? And you invite Copilot to find flaws so that you can be ahead of them and proactive. And for those of you who are newer to your journey with Copilot, I highly recommend what is called meta prompting. And this is where we know what we want to do, but we're not sure how to craft the prompt. So what we do is we go to Copilot and we say, hey, I want to do this extensive data analysis for some financial forecasting. Help me write some really high quality prompts around this. What Copilot will give you back is a sample of a prompt, and you might need to change some of the details for your situation, but it gets you insight into what a high quality prompt looks like, starts to get that muscle memory of seeing what's needed, what's important, and kind of gives you that jump start. So I will focus on just a couple of these today due to our limited time for demonstrations. And the first one I want to talk about is this idea of that role. So a role could be anything from, hey, think of this as a teacher, think of this as an analyst, to a very specific person. Maybe you're trying to incorporate certain fundamentals from different organizational leaders and whatnot. So you can take either approach, but the reason this is beneficial is because it's going to activate those specific knowledge subsets. When you think about what AI can do and what it's been trained on, it's got so much information it can pull from that if I want something more specific, it can kind of drill it down and narrow into this specific area. It also then puts on some constrained thinking. So rather than all of the other things I might add in irrelevant types of roles, I'm going to then get a greater specificity for my specific task. So we're going to go ahead and try this together and just see how it might change something. So let me come back over here to my spot here. And just as a note, I do recommend starting a new chat anytime you change topics. If you don't, it does try to link those different topics together. So I am just going to hit new chat here. All right, so let's kind of take this approach of how might something look very different if we give it a role to kind of go with. So I'm going to just say we are implementing a bring your own, and I'm going to let it be spelled incorrectly as much as I hate that, just because it does a great job of understanding. So we're doing a bring your own device policy, and I need to notify my team of the impacts this change will have. And then we're going to say, approach this as a team leader in this case. So as I do this, we're going to do a comparison one here in just a moment, and I'm going to add some more details just to see this contrast. As it comes through, it's going to take on that mentality of a leader and how the impacts are going to have on the team. So I didn't give it a specific format. I just wanted to see kind of what came out. So it's saying, okay, hey team, here's what's changing. It has a lot of room to make some assumptions here. So I really want to look through this. What would have made this better as well is if I'd attached what that policy is. So we'll do that here in a second as well. So as I read through this, it's saying, okay, here's what it means for you. Here are some security requirements that are going to impact you and what you need to do next. So now I want to actually approach that as a IT change manager. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start a new chat again. We can always come back to that one if we want. Your chats are listed here on the left-hand side. So now I'm going to add a couple of things. So you are a IT change manager, And I want you to draft a short announcement for, and actually we're going to switch this. We're going to about a, oops, it doesn't seem to be selected there. So we're going to say about a bring your own device policy update. And I'm giving it some specifics here. Format it as an email with the subject line, 2 to 3 sentences as the overview. So I'm being much more specific in here. And one of the tips I would highly recommend is if you invite Copilot to ask you questions, and if you tell it what to do when it doesn't know certain information, you are going to drastically reduce the likelihood of getting hallucinations. So we're going to do that. And I'm also going to hit that / to start searching through my recent documents. Let's go ahead and see if I have one in here. All right, so I might have a page here that I've created. I'll just attach that here so it has some additional details to pull from in this conversation. So we upgraded a lot of different things about this prompt, and let's see how it compares to our first one. All right, and while it's thinking, I am just going to come check the chat and see if there's any questions. Looks like we are caught up. All right, so thought pretty quickly here. One note I'll call out is that if you see this little stop button in your prompt text box, that means that Copilot's still generating its previous response and it can't accept a new prompt. So if you needed, maybe I really needed to attach this and I forgot to, you can hit this stop icon and it will halt the generating it's doing right now and allow you to reprompt. But now it also gives me great insight because I'm not scrolled all the way down. I can see it disappeared. We're done with that response. All right, so as I'm doing this, because I invited it to ask me questions, I now have 5 questions that I can answer that are going to increase the specificity around this. Just due to time, I am going to say make your best guess, but for you, I would encourage you to answer those because it can then take all of that detail in, add it to what you said in your first prompt, and pull together a really polished result. All right, and it did kind of tell me, hey, I put in TBD for any placeholders. I didn't want to make an assumption. One of the other things that I will add as well is to explicitly list any assumptions that it's making so that I can see if those assumptions are accurate or if I need to make a clarifying adjustment in our current conversation. All right, so it is still looking at an email where we have our subject here, and it's kind of approaching it from hello everyone rather than hello team. Very small detail, but it is due to that change in the role. So it's kind of going to go through this, explain what's changing, why it matters, what you need to do. And so some of the elements are the same, but it approached it for a much larger audience versus this is my direct team that I'm working with. So as you give it kind of some of that additional information, it's calling out my TBDs here so that I can input that information and the compliance deadlines and so forth. So I'm going to pause there. Does anyone have questions about when you might want to do this or benefits, how this works? All right, well, we'll go to our next example then. Few shot prompting is one of the things I personally do probably the most often. And so this is, again, where you're going to include good examples. And if you really want to take it to the next level, you can include bad examples as well to enhance the description of your prompt. So if you say, write a short summary, make this concise, we're assuming that the definition Copilot has of concise is the same as our definition of what concise means. So rather than doing that, we're going to give it an example of what that length, tone, and style are like, and let Copilot kind of mimic that. So this works because of how good these generative tools are at imitation. It's one of its strengths, and so it will look at what you did and say, okay, I'm doing this same idea, but on this topic. It also is going to reduce that ambiguity and assumptions that we're making that it means the same thing to everyone. And when we include things like the bad examples, we're also guiding what to avoid more specifically. So there's a ton of different benefits to doing this, and we're going to test some of them out right now. So once again, I'm going to kind of switch to a new chat over here, and we're going to kind of take a look at this. So again, I'm actually going to take on this email approach, and we're going to do this a couple of ways. So let me grab this. Actually, we're going to start first without an example so you can compare and contrast. So I want to draft an email announcing a new time tracking system that's going to be implemented next month, highlight the benefits of the tool, and provide a brief overview of the training sessions that will be available. If I don't add additional context here, it is going to make that information up. So if I have that list, let's attach it as a file. For the basic experience, you should be able to attach any of your cloud files. You can also drag and drop them to get them uploaded to your OneDrive as well. But in this case, I'm just going to tell it the new time tracking system is Dynamics 365. And we're going to be doing training sessions in, every Tuesday in July at 12 p.m. That sentence could probably be formatted better, but let's just go ahead and leave it as it is, and we'll compare. So it's coming back pretty quick, which means I don't have to kind of duplicate this. So we're saying, okay, here's the upcoming launch of our new time tracking system. Here are some benefits. And so it's digging into the information it just has about that time tracking system. I still want to look through and make sure that's set up and true for what we'll be implementing. And looks like it says, hey, here's your example of when the training options are going to be there. So let's do this slightly different. And I am going to start a new chat just so it doesn't mix up the two. And we're going to start from here and say, follow the format of this memo. And usually, all right, if it doesn't pull up, we can click on this plus. So we'll just say that one in here. Okay, great. So I have a construction memo that we sent out before, and I want to follow the same type of information. So if you have templates and information you consistently need to do, this helps make sure it's included, or there's a placeholder for it if the information hasn't been created yet. So while it's thinking about that, I will just open up this reference so you can see visually how different this is. If I was just going for tone and style, I could probably have pasted some text into the chat itself, but you're a little more limited when it comes to things like formatting with bold and different bullet points and so forth. So if you need more extensive formatting, I would recommend attaching a templated document as an example. All right, so let's come down here, and this already looks tremendously different. So same prompt, I just gave it a format to work with, and it's saying, okay, it's still an email like I asked it to be, saying, hey team, this is what we're doing. Here's the background. Here's about Dynamics 365. And then here are the benefits to that new system, implementation timeline. And so you can see it's following those same topics, timeline, what to expect. It pulled from those different topics. Now, it didn't have all the same data because it's not the same type of memo, but it drew inspiration from it. And my response is I think it's greatly enhanced. It has a lot more details and follows that formatting. So you can add on to that where, just so you know, if you use a shift enter, you can go to the next line in your prompt. So if I was using this, I might do shift enter and say good example, and then copy and paste that or attach that document. And then I can shift enter and say bad example. Just make sure it's really clear that one is what you don't want to do and one is what you do want. Otherwise, the good example usually gives pretty good results in my experience. All right, pausing again. Any questions so far? All right, not seeing any hands up or questions in the chat. So, um, and I don't see anything in our Q&A either. So we'll keep going. So the next approach you can take is what's called chain of thought prompting. And this is where we're asking the tool we're using to explain the steps that it's working through for the response. And so it can be as simple as saying, before you respond, please walk me through your thought process step by step. And when I've given this example in some of my different trainings, one of the enhancements that's come through with Copilot is this depth of reasoning. It shows you quick response or think deeper. When you're on Think Deeper, it does actually list out the process it's working through before it gives you the response. And that is definitely a start. But I still like this chain of thought prompting approach because it kind of forces some additional pieces here. So not only is it leveraging the output and trying to improve the quality because of the data that we're asking for, it really leans into the understanding of how the predictive nature of this tool works. So when it's generating a response, it actually generates letter by letter. And so as you get each letter of your response from Copilot, it's creating new context it has to think through before it gives you the next letter. So when we force it to walk through this reasoning step by step, it forces it to create a high quality reasoning process and then follow it. This then gives you the option to, even if it's just a little bit of insight, you now can see, oh, that step right there is totally off and it's going to throw off the rest of my results. So you get some added transparency here and some debugging for if it's not quite what you wanted and you need to make some changes, you have some pretty good ideas of what to change. So I really like adding this in here. There's kind of a lot of opportunity with it. Let's go ahead and try this one now. So what we're going to do in this instance is just something a little bit different. I want to kind of analyze a data set. So as I do this, I'll call out one thing. We'll see if it does it to me. The other thing you can add on here is actually telling it the steps that you need it to also make sure it goes through. So in this one, I'm saying, hey, follow these numbered steps. So make sure you're stating what the columns are and what they represent. Identify any data quality issues. And so I'm also adding on to, don't just do what you think is best, also make sure you're doing this and walk me through it. So we've given it a concise definition. Oops, it's moving all over. We told it what concise meant. It's between 150 and 200 words. And at the very end, I said, list your reasoning step by step before answering. So I do need a data set for this. So I am going to hit this plus icon, add some work content. If I don't see what I'm looking for, I can, again, upload or drag and drop onto this conversation. But let's go ahead and do this one right here. All right. Let me make sure this doesn't need to be financial data. I said financial data. Let's give it some financial information. All right. It does help when you keep the context clear for it. So we'll just give it this information. It's not the most detailed data set, but again, you can always review what information you gave it. So I can already tell this is by default of the prompt that I gave it. It's using the Think Deeper approach. So as it starts to think through this, this is going to take a little bit longer, but we can actually expand, and as it follows different steps, I'll get insight into, hey, it's using Python right now. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. And each step is going to be shown that same way. All right, so one thing I will call out every once in a while, depending on how I word, show me your step-by-step reasoning, sometimes it does come back and say, hey, I can't really show you underneath the hood, but I can kind of walk you through generally. That is okay. it sometimes just gets picky about the wording and wants to make sure you understand what its limitation here is, but it still is going to give you the benefits that we're talking about. So step-by-step reasoning, it's going over the file. It's saying because there's no category, date, or volume field, I have to assume that the cost is any numeric metric for ranking. So right there, I'm already getting insight into, ooh, is that correct? Or do I need to go update my data set so that Copilot can better analyze it? Validated the numbers, it checked potential data quality issues, and it constructed a table of the top 5 items. So it's walking me through all of that, and then it's giving me its response with the steps. Let's see, up here I said, state what columns, identify data quality issues. So let's come back down. I have columns in the data set. Here are the data quality issues to watch for. So in the response itself, I'm getting all of those steps I requested. So hopefully this starts to give you an idea for how those added details, added expectations are going to change this rather than saying, hey, analyze this data set and tell me what it's saying. This is much more tailored to my result. I do see a question that says, instead of uploading documents to Copilot, can you ask it to search or analyze documents in a folder or a SharePoint folder? If you have a Copilot basic license like this experience I'm showing right now, it's not going to inherently be able to reach any of your internal documents. If you do have a Copilot Premium license, it will have a lot more capability to do that kind of functionality where it helps you search through your work data and bring back relevant results and maybe compare some of those different files. So what you're looking for is definitely possible with that elevated license. Great question. All right, so that's chain of thought prompting. There's a lot of different places where you might use this, but I'm going to pause here for just another moment and see if there are any additional questions. All right, well, feel free. We can always go back to any of the topics we've talked about, but let's talk about reverse prompting. I kind of snuck this one in a little bit earlier as well, but reverse prompting is where we're inviting Copilot to ask us questions. So inherently, I like to think of Copilot as kind of a golden retriever or an overeager intern, whichever resonates a little more with you. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to come back empty-handed. So what they're going to do is, if they're confused about your ask, they might say, I don't want to bother them. I'm just going to do my best, and I'll see how it goes. When we invite it to ask us questions, it is more likely to let us know upfront what information it's missing and what it needs to actually give us a successful response. So the reason this works is it drastically reduces AI hallucinations, because rather than you being like, okay, I went through all of the steps, I filled in my Mad Lib, I should be good, I'm going to move on. This gives you that opportunity to let Copilot say, thank you for the Mad Lib. Also, can you clarify these things? It then also kind of gives you that teammate dynamic and pulls you more into that mindset of how to think through what to give it. So as it asks those questions, you'll, at least every time I've done this, I'm constantly like, oh, didn't even occur to me to say that. And the next time I go to prompt, that now is in my experience bank, and I might be more likely to add in those things up front. All right, so let's do that. So starting a new chat once again, and we're going to have it ask us questions. So we're going to kind of do this in the mindset of a policy summary. And if you do want any of these prompts, I know they're kind of unique to the data sets that I have, but I'm happy to paste any of these in the chat as well if they're helpful as starting points. I also do just want to point out the suggested prompts and ideas that are listed underneath your main text box are a great support. And each of your conversations have contextual suggestions based on the topics of what you've done so far. So feel free to click on this browse more prompts, and it will actually bring up a prompt gallery where you can search through and look at some different analysis prompts or look at some different creative prompts. All right, so I'm going to come in here and say, ask me what you need before you summarize this policy. And I'm actually going to attach the document. And after, I want it to ask me any questions and help me distill this into 3 key responsibilities, do's and don'ts. So let's say policy here, and we're going to do this one. All right. Now, for those of you who might have maybe a premium license and it can access your internal data, it is still really beneficial to attach specific documents in moments like this, because you might have multiple documents named similarly or about similar content, and we want to just narrow that down and ensure it's looking at the relevant data set we need. All right, so it says, got it, and before I summarize, let me ask you some questions. So who's the intended audience? If we had filled in that Mad Libs and done that, we probably would have already added this, but we're just going to say the training team is the audience. And when you answer these, you can do this in a number of different ways. There's really not a wrong answer here. There was one time I actually answered one and accidentally hit enter, and it in that instance, I believe it just said, okay, I'm going to make my best guess on the rest of them, and used my one response. There was another time where it said, okay, great. And now what about question 2, 3, and 4? I like to give all of my answers in one response back. So we can do that in a couple of ways. I can just clarify it by saying, this is the audience, summary should reflect, and so forth. Or you can actually number them as well to make sure it's clear and say, number 1, training team. Number 2, this is what it should reflect. So it doesn't super matter which way. The only thing I would caution you to is kind of just brain dumping it all into what feels like 1 or 2 sentences, because it might overlap those responses in a way you didn't mean for it to. And let's go ahead and see. So what's the second question? Reflect this draft exactly as written, or should I treat unclear sections as TBD? Summary, reflect unclear as TBD. And I'm just going to send that off just so that I think you get the idea, and I think you know how to answer questions. So as you start to answer those, it's going to, in this case, I only answered 2. It says, okay, well, I'm going to use that information and make my best guess on the rest. So here's a plain language summary like I asked for. This is a travel expense policy on how to do all of this. Any parts that are not explicit in this draft appear as TBD. Here's the 3 key responsibilities. And so it pulled out, and let's go ahead and actually click on this draft so you can see it too, have an idea of what I'm adding in here. So there's an introduction, guidelines. So it's going through all of this information, and it pulled that into 3 main points. Let's come back down. Here's the do's, here's the don'ts. Once again, very simplified. And this now becomes a much more approachable type of communication for my team. Policies do need to be written in certain ways and with certain language that sometimes is not always inherently easy to understand. Another thing you could do here is have it help you write an FAQ. That question and answer format can be really easy to understand as well. So why this matters. And it's also then giving me, hey, I didn't have any of these details. So if you give them to me, I can help you. If not, you're going to need to fill these in. And then down here at the bottom, it's pulling up my one source of information it didn't pull from anywhere else. And for anyone curious, these are the contextual suggestions. What they're going to do is just start your next prompt. You can still add any details or modifications that you would like to. So I'm going to come back here and pause, see if we have any more questions. But if not, I'm going to showcase some additional tips and tricks. So this is definitely the point where we're towards the end of our session. I've hopefully given you some insight as to how this can impact your conversation overall. I want you to get to those results as quickly as possible. It's fun to chat with Copilot, but we don't want to spend all day doing that. So if you have any questions or things that you were hoping to have answered while you were here today, please put those in the chat, and I'm going to just share a couple of things you can try. Some of them do pull from the tips that we talked about today, like ask me 5 questions that will improve this response. That's that same approach of reverse prompting. I'm giving you everything I have. Help me know what you don't have. One of my favorite things to do, especially when you're being creative or you're trying to get over writer's block, or just how much that can stop you when you have just a blank page to get moving on, I ask for options almost every single time. And if I need to list something with 2 different titles, I'll ask for 10 different titles so that I can start to really use it as a let's brainstorm together. I like this part of that idea. Let's mix and match. And I get to put my own spin on it without feeling like, I don't like that one response at all. That wasn't what I wanted. The show your work is that same mentality of walk me through your reasoning. Once again, I found certain phrasing of this can have it add some added clarity here. There's nothing wrong with that. I also do want to just note the question I saw come up in the chat. Can you build a resource in Copilot that others in your organization can use based on parameters you dictate? So would love to explore that more with you. Just to clarify, if I come back to one of my conversations here, if you're talking about the prompt itself, you actually can share the prompt. There's 2 different things you can do in your conversation. If you hover over something you sent, you can actually save that prompt so you can use it again. And there is a copy link option. What this will do is it only works internally to your organization, but it's going to copy a link and let somebody else use your prompt as a starting ground and tailor it as they need to. So that's one way that you can kind of build that out. If you're more talking about, hey, I pulled this together and I want this to become a resource we use, one of the easiest ways to turn your responses into a reusable resource is this little pencil icon. It allows you to edit in pages. And what it does is it takes the full response from Copilot and transitions it, including the conversational elements up here. It turns it into a reusable page that you can share, collaborate with, get feedback on, and you can also tinker with it and make sure that it is exactly as you want it to be. So I might remove those conversational elements, and once I'm ready to give this to someone else and let them leverage it, we can share it just like any other document. So you'll be able to determine if they can edit. You can determine if they have expiration dates on how long they can access. And these actually have an additional collaborative option where you can copy as a component. So if you use Teams, you could actually paste a little window into this page and people could see it and use it directly from the chat. So let me know if I didn't understand your question. I saw a couple different ways to take that, so I'm happy to discuss more. All right, create an FAQ. I will say this is a great option, especially when you're looking at things like policies because of that more specific language. If you don't have a resource of information that has been asked before, it will be frequently anticipated questions and just kind of assuming where confusion might most likely come up. So just like to call that out. Couple additional things to try is that meta prompting approach where you say, hey, help me create a prompt, please. I know this is what I want to do and I'm not getting the results I want. Help me write a high quality prompt. You can also have it ask you clarifying questions. This does really kind of go back to that same idea of when you invite it to ask questions, it opens up that permission. The other thing that I would say is you can use this last one as a prompt itself where you're saying, hey, I don't know how to break this down. But I also invite you to consider as you go on this prompting journey, you might see people who write page-long prompts that are really intricate and detailed, and those definitely have their place. But there are often times where it's more beneficial to break up that large task into smaller pieces so that you have more oversight into each step and you make sure it's being built properly every step of the way. So sometimes if we kind of overload and put everything into one prompt, it might miss key elements and only focus on certain parts. So I do like to, as much as possible, turn those big tasks into smaller pieces and layer in the information as I go. But all of that to say, I hope to hear from some of these journeys that you've gone on. We've definitely covered some of the different ways we can strategically approach these AI conversations. So I do just want to take a quick moment. We would love your feedback as we're, hosting these sessions. We would love to know if this is what met your expectations for what you hoped we'd cover. And we would love for you to reach out as well if there's something different you are interested in, or we can help you in any other ways. So I have put that there if you can share that information with us. And I do just want to add in, if any of you are launching Copilot or working to make some of these technological changes, we have helped a ton of different organizations and would be more than happy to have conversations on how we can support you in that journey as well. So I will put a couple of resources here if you'd like to reach out to us. Please, we would love to have a conversation. And additionally, I want to call out, we did record today's session. It will not be, the link shows up, it won't work for you here in the meeting chat, but we will follow up here in the next few days with more information if you are looking for the session slides or the recording from today. So all of that being said, thank you all for taking some time out of your day to spend it with us, and we look forward to seeing you in some of our future sessions. All right, awesome. I do see the comment. I would love the recording. We will reach out and I can get you that information after today. Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop today's recording, but I will be on here for a few additional minutes if anyone has questions that they do want to ask. And otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day.